joined by Rod Babers, former Texas defensive back, joins us on 365 Sports and, of course, a part of what he does with On Texas Football. How you doing, man? I know it's not been a great week for you, but you won't be out there free agent for very long. Look at that beautiful smile. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate you having me on. And, hey, when my Longhorns are good, it's hard to put a damper on that, right? Hard to rain on that parade, and that's certainly what we're talking about today.
All right. How much or does what happened in Austin put a scar in Texas, and or is it leverage for revenge? Is that even come into play?
It has to. I think it's a big part of why Texas, in my opinion, has a good chance to win this matchup. Hard to beat a good team twice. There's no doubt that Georgia overwhelmed Texas that first time around, and it was mostly their defensive front versus that Texas offensive line. The Texas offensive line had sits, and they gave up 7 sacks in that game. And then they were struggling at the time, right? 7 sacks in that game. I believe they allowed 11 sacks in a 2-game span after that Vanderbilt contest. And since then, that Texas offensive line has played some of their best football. And I think especially in the running game, that's where Georgia really suffocated Texas. Not only did they apply a lot of pressure when Texas was in third and long and predictable passing situations, but Texas could not run the football at all. They had a abysmal rushing performance. In the last 2 weeks, Texas found their rushing identity. All right, 250, 240 yards rushing in the last 2 weeks, and they went on the road to A&M, and that run game traveled. Trey Weisner ended up with 186 rushing yards, a career high. So the running game is hitting its peak and maybe maturing at the right time. If that running game travels to Atlanta versus Georgia, Longhorns got a good chance to win this game because they'll stay out of those predictable third and long passing situations where Georgia were able to pin their ears back and get after Quinn Ewers.
Rod, Trey Weisner being a stud is not surprising to us because we covered him in high school at Connolly before he went off to DeSoto. Yeah. And back then he was a bit skinnier, but he could still slide, and he had that speed, and he's got a lot more tough. He had toughness then, but now he's got like the muscle to back up some of that toughness.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not surprised, I guess, but when you're surrounded by 5-star backs and you're young and you got to do some certain things, but what has impressed you so much about him, or impressed you most about him, and just what are your thoughts big picture when it comes to Trey Weisner moving forward in this offense?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, the football character stands out. Sark talked about that, how this is a guy that earned the respect of his teammates on special teams, because that's where he really cut his teeth. That's where last year he could get the most playing time because that running back room has been so loaded. And even to start this season, it's been really loaded. He was patient and waited his turn, and I think that patience actually that is symbolic of a trait that I think also that of his athletically that helps him in his performance as a running back. He's a really patient runner. The Texas run game has some variety in it, but the wide zone, the split wide zone is kind of their bread and butter run concept. And it takes patience to allow those blocks to align, patience in terms of your vision to see the cut back lane when it's there, if it's there. And he's got elite vision and elite patience as a runner. And I don't think Texas really understood his value in terms of the versatility he provides, because he can also run downhill. Some of their counter concepts, some of their gap schemes, he's also been able to run downhill. So a guy, initially C.J. Baxter gets hurt. Everybody thought he would be your bell cow running back. And everybody thought Jaden Blue would be the catalyst because of his versatility. It turns out, Trey Weisner was the perfect back for this running game the whole time. Dealt with a hamstring injury early on this season. Sark said if not for that hamstring injury, he thought that he probably would have ascended to this role as the marquee running back earlier. But there's no doubt about it, guys. He is one of the most trustworthy players on this team now. Trey Weisner, and not a lot of people would have expected to say that this late in the season, but that's where Sark went when there was a crisis, all right, among the offense, disastrous third quarters where you had a pick six and a fumble versus A&M. He went to Trey Weisner. In the Kentucky game where Jaden Blue couldn't hold on to the football and had fumbles, where Jared Gibson, the other running back, had fumbles, only one running back he could trust with the football, and that was Trey Weisner. And he could only trust the running game because the passing game was inconsistent with Quinn Ewers coming off the injury. So it's amazing that he's been leaning on Trey Weisner now at the most critical points of the season.
Rod, that was a game second half-wise. Both defenses were just on lockdown this week. I mean, A&M did a very good job on Texas not letting him score in the second half after first half kind of getting got a couple times. But how much of that, when you look at the game, is A&M is potential that has not been realized yet. Texas has now been in this for the last couple of years, a year in the Big 12 where they were good but not great, and then winning the Big 12 and then hitting the ground running, having played in a lot of these games. As for this A&M team has not played in any of them until Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. You could bring that up. I mean, in the SEC, I thought the Aggies, even though the first-year coach under Mike Elko, I think he's doing a good job. Just the program in general, dealing with the SEC, that ecosystem. They play in big games. They play in big games. They play in physical games. I just think we got to give a lot of credit to Sark and his vision. I think ultimately that's what we saw materialize out there on the road versus A&M. That defense that Texas has, guys, it is. You may be talking about top three to five greatest defenses in Texas football history at this point.
Yeah, statistically, and also what you watch, right?
Yes, yeah, both. I was a part of a really good defense in 2001. I think it's better than our defense, and we were one of the best defenses in Texas football history. I've talked to guys like some of the best, Derek Johnson and Alex Okafor and some other guys, and they talk about it in the same light. It is very special in that regard, guys, and you saw it versus A&M. A&M had one running back rush, I think, that got at least 5 yards in that game. I mean, that's how suffocating. 2 goal line stands. And by the way, that Aggie defense was a top 10 red zone offense, guys. It wasn't a scrub red zone offense. One of the best red zone offenses in the country. 2 goal line stands in the game. One to start, one to finish. They make plays in terms of takeaways. They make splash plays and getting to the quarterback. There's really nothing that this defense isn't elite or among the best in the country at. And it's been a long time since we've been able to say that about a Texas defense, probably going back to 08, 09. So I think the defense is good enough. I'm not just not hyperbole. I think it's good enough for Texas to win a national title. They're starting to remind me a little bit of Michigan last year, strangely enough, where they're led by just an elite defense. And then now they have a running game to complement and a quarterback that can make plays if he needs to.
What is, if they have something that could bite them on defense, what would it be?
That is good. That's a great question. I was going to say the rush defense maybe, because I saw it got a little bit exposed versus, Arkansas ran the ball a little bit. There was some leaky yardage there. Georgia, when Georgia was able to run in the interior a little bit early on in that game, that's where I would like to say, but it's not a weakness. It's it may be a vulnerability, but it's not a weakness. I don't know if they have a weakness, guys. And I know this defense as well as anybody, and I'm not just saying that because I'm wearing the burnt orange. If they had a weakness, I'd let you know. I don't really think they have one. The best pass defense in the country. They get after the quarterback really well. One of the better pass rushes in the country. They make a lot of splash plays, get takeaways. Rush defense could be a vulnerability, not a weakness, though. I don't know if they have one.
Rod Babers with us, former Texas star, with us on 365 Sports.
Rod, Georgia, part 2. What's different about this go-round in your opinion, and how do you feel about this matchup this go-round?
What's there? The defense is the same, so that's not different. What's different is the way the offensive line is run blocking. Is it legit? You were able to, and that the most, I think, impressive thing. I don't know if the most impressive thing. One of the more impressive things about that win over the Aggies, guys. Kelvin Banks went down first half of the first quarter. He went down. They put in Trevor Gooseby in there, who's a redshirt freshman, I believe, against the Aggies on the road, hostile environment. I mean, they got NFL players on that defensive line, guys who are going to play on Sundays. And there was no drop-off, significant drop-off. Even though you lost your left tackle, best player on your team in that game, and there was no drop-off. It just shows you the depth they have in the offensive line. Now, the concern is what's going to be stats of Kelvin Banks versus Georgia. Because Georgia will see that, and maybe they'll look at it as, hey, that's actually not so impressive. We're going after that guy. And the Aggies went after him, too. They just couldn't exploit it. I think that's the difference, the way the offensive line is playing. Hopefully, Kelvin Banks is back. But my point is, even with Trevor Gooseby, their offensive line is playing at a really, really high level. So the running game now has found its groove, it's found its identity. That's the difference, the biggest difference to me. And if you can get a Quinn that doesn't play his worst half of football ever, potentially, like he did versus Georgia, Texas will have a really good chance because their defense will keep them in every game and will.
Rod, Quinn Ewers continues to play through injury. Arch Manning, came in running situations. Is that where Texas gets a little maybe tight and locked up? Is how do you judge Quinn Ewers' health and effectiveness throughout a game? Because he certainly earned the opportunity not to be benched unless he's playing really horrible, which he hasn't. But you also have a situation where he's playing through injury, and you kind of have to rein some guys in sometimes.
Yeah, Sark said before the game, before the Aggie game, that he made Quinn, I believe on Thursday, hey, I need you to give me a practice where you're showing me everything, right? I need to be able to judge accurately if you can go in that game full speed, and if there are any lingering effects of the injury. And he decided after watching him, go full speed in that practice that, hey, Quinn was ready to go and he could play at a high enough level to execute the offense. Now, he looked still very mobile. We were worried about mobility. He's got plenty of mobility. We saw that in the game versus the Aggies. That's why I think Texas getting any type of bye week going into the postseason, the college football playoff, is important because you do have a quarterback that's injured. But the truth is, and I'm glad, Coach pulled out the Arch Manning package in the red zone. End up getting them a touchdown in the red zone versus the Aggies. I do think that you'll see that package going forward. I think it's something that they'll utilize going forward. And Arch there's a contingency plan in case Quinn, knock on wood, has lingering effects from the injury. And the contingency plan is to make sure that Arch gets accelerated development here in the postseason, giving him more reps with the first team in practice to make sure he's ready to go. So there's no concern. There are a third of Longhorn fans who'd rather see Arch in there anyway than Quinn. I'm not one of those people.
Rod, I hope you don't mind me asking the question, but obviously Ewers, we know about his ankle, and then he played really well. Like even had that huge run early on that really kind of like A&M was like, oh, damn. As a player on something like that, do they still like shoot up a player? Is that something that is still done? Because there's a lot of be careful with all that. But is like a Novocaine shot or something like that?
I don't know about it now. When I played, it was a thing.
Okay, and I wanted to lead to that, so I appreciate your honesty. No, I appreciate it.
When I played, guys, they were like, shots for pain, whatever it may be. I know now there's more enlightenment about that, and we're more informed and educated about it and good, so you don't have kind of the long-term effects and things like that. So I don't know right now if that is the case. They talked about they have a revolutionary ankle bracelet ankle brace that he used there during the game. So that's about as far as I know. But back in my day, that was definitely a reality. Hey, man, if you can shoot it up so I don't have to feel the pain of it, then I can fight through it for the game. That's something that guys definitely took part in. Back in my day, I feel old now talking.
Yeah, I think even back in the days when players were in high school, you could get that. Do you think Georgia plays to who they're playing as far as up or down to competition, or is that just a falsehood that you hear at times?
I feel like Georgia's at the end of their – I don't want to say the end of their dynastic run, but they're so far into their dynastic run. If you guys watch like NFL, you see how Kansas City's winning games right now?
Yeah.
Right? They're just they play mediocre average football for like 3 quarters, and in clutch critical moments, they show up because they got the clutch gene. They now the DNA of their team and their organization now, because they've been in those clutch situations on the biggest stages. They actually now have a switch. They can flip it on and off when they need to. I feel like Georgia's at that point too, where they have that championship DNA, can flip the switch, and they flipped it on Texas. They did. And I think toward the end of dynasties, and Golden State was probably there at one point. When you're at the end of a dynasty, I'm not going to say, you are distracted, but I think there is a little bit of complacency. They don't get us up for some of those games. Georgia has championship DNA. Georgia will be up for Texas. They'll play their best brand of football, best version of football, just like they did when they came down to Austin and put an Old Testament, old biblical style butt whipping on Texas. They'll be ready to go for it. And I think it's fitting, guys, that Sark, his vision was for Texas to build this program where you could win the SEC and win the national title. And you got to go through a dynasty to do it. and you got to do it basically in their place in Atlanta. That ain't nothing more fitting than that. If Sarkin's program are ready, all right, to ascend, to be on their way to a dynastic run, got to take that. To beat a man, you got to beat the man, like Ric Flair used to say, right?
Absolutely. Ooh. There you go. Great reference. Yeah.
Rod, I just there are nights where you watch Georgia and it's like they came home from school thinking they were going to have their favorite meal, and the mom's like, "Look, I'm just too busy. We're having mac and cheese." Like, there's not. And then there's nights like when they play Texas, it's like, "Oh, it's steak night." Let's go. And that's how they do. Yep. And they were like that last week. Georgia Tech's a good team. I'm not trying to knock Georgia Tech, but they looked like that early on against Georgia Tech, where they're like, all right, I mean, I don't dislike mac and cheese, and I'll eat it. And then at the end of the game, they're like, "Oh, whoa, okay, we're not going to get to eat steak if we don't, if we don't finish this part."
Yeah. So like I said, I think they can flip the switch, and they may come into that game with the switch already flipped, like they did, early this year, or they may go into this game and Texas may get a lead, and then like against Alabama and some other teams, like against Georgia Tech, they have to flip the switch during the game. Either way, I'm not going to feel confident about beating Georgia until you actually beat Georgia. And Kirby Smart, man, he might be and is the best coach in college football. So Texas has a tall task ahead of them. I will say this: it's hard to beat a good team twice. I experienced this in 2001. We played Colorado, and we beat the hell out of Colorado earlier that year. Played them in the Big 12 title game later, and lost to them. We had turnovers, 3 turnovers in the first half. We had multiple starters go down and get hurt. No excuses. We still should have won that game. My point is, it is tough, and we were better than Colorado at the time. But Colorado found a way to get the best of us. It's tough to beat a really good team twice. Hopefully that is the case for the Longhorns.
Well, in 99, I think it was, Texas beat Nebraska in Austin and then turned around in the Big 12 championship game, because we know UT owned them from the beginning.
Man.
But in 99, Nebraska beat up Applewhite pretty good in the Big 12 championship game. That's one of the examples that I can remember.
Yep.
Last thing, you mentioned about beating people in big places. They won in Ann Arbor. Yes, Michigan, not who they were a year ago. They beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. They've won in Lincoln. There were places that were nightmares at times, but it seems like no matter if Texas was 11-1 or a team that was going to play for the national title or during that 10-year run, but my God, when there's a game like that, like A&M and all the buildup, it's like they play free and easy, and the other team seems to get a little bit like claustrophobic. Is that because no matter what the record is, Texas players we're still Texas? Is that true?
There is some of that. I mean, you come to Texas for those big games, right? You want to play on the big stage. You want to play in those big games. And I personally, that's what I wanted to do. That's why I came to the University of Texas. So I think for the Longhorns, you should relish in that moment if you're a big-time player. That's a few reasons that you come to Texas. You want to play with the best players. You want to obviously accomplish your dreams and go to the NFL. You want to play for championships, but you want to play in those big games. You want to make big plays in those big games. That's how you become a legend. That's how you get legendary status at the University of Texas. And I made a few big plays in big games, not enough because we should have won more of those big games. But I think that's what all players dream of, man, is making that big play in the biggest game on the biggest stage with the world watching. And that's when you come to Texas.
Rod, great stuff, man. Good luck. We'll have you on again. They'll be in the playoff. We know that. It's just a matter of when are they going to play, how often they're going to have to play, and how long they keep winning. Thank you so much for your time. Love having you on.
Thank you, guys. You guys take care. Have a good one.
Rod Babers with us, former Texas defensive back. Great stuff from him on Texas, Georgia, coming up on Saturday.